This video is a response to the rapper D1. He just recently released a new music video and it's called Racist Christians.
Racist Christians, I've been searching for you. I've been wondering where you live and what kind of church you go to.
And I like to just take a minute to respond to some of the things that he brings up in it. But first, I just want to say that this is brother talking to brother. D1's not the enemy. I actually love D1. I don't listen to much hip-hop anymore, so I haven't been following his music career lately, but I used to listen to D1 a while ago, and I love the brother, and so this is just kind of an in-house critique debate, and for if he watches this, or if anyone else watched the music video, and I just want to provide a couple things to think about. What I really appreciate was at the end of the video where he talks about some of the criticism that he's received, and he says he wants to have a good dialogue and make people think, and I think that's important. I think we should have this discussion about race and racism. So it's not a conversation I'm trying to shy away from, even though I disagree with a lot of the conclusions and some of the things that he says. So I just want to kind of just give some pushback and some things to consider if you've watched Racist Christians and you agree with it. Okay, before I get into a critique, let me say something positive here, because not everything in the song is bad, and in fact a lot of it is good if it's applied at the right audience and the right people. The fact is that there are some people who do struggle with racism. There's some people who not just struggle, they embrace racism, and they need to be corrected, and they need to, they need this wake-up call. And so the problem is not so much with the song if the audience is right, but I think that with a lot of these things, the audience is meant to be a lot wider than what I think there is. I mean, what I'm trying to say is I think that a lot of people are being called racists who aren't actually racist. And I think that's where a lot of the rub is. But if there is a person who is a racist, then yeah, a lot of this stuff is true, and it is right to direct them at them. But I just want to say one thing first, because he says this line here. He says,
and if you from a family that taught you racism, you could change it. Dialogue and prayer mixed with counseling just might rearrange it.
I love that. That's great. And you know what? That's a lot better, because a lot of the people who are teaching critical race theory, they're saying that racism is inherent with whiteness, and that a person can't actually repent of their racism, and they are just inherently racist.
White people are racist. No, you're always going to be racist, actually.
And so the message D1 is giving is that, no, if you were raised that way, with prayer, with counseling, you can change that. You don't have to continue in those ways. And that's a good, positive message, and I appreciate that. Okay, so in the very first verse, he says this: do you pledge allegiance to Christ and not to the enemy? If so, then how can you justify hatred and white supremacy? Okay, fair enough. White supremacy needs to be condemned. But here's the problem, is that while this is up on the screen, there is a news article saying that a pastor was kicked out of his congregation for saying Black Lives Matter. Well, here's the thing, is that yes, Black Lives Matter, but I would not be caught dead saying that, because people associate that term with the organization. Words have meanings. In our culture, when people say that, they think of the organization, and the organization is anti-Christian. They are trained Marxists. Two of the three co-founders admitted that they have been trained in Marxist theory.
I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
The worldview of Black Lives Matter is critical race theory, which is racist at its core. The core beliefs of the Black Lives Matter organization is hostile to Christian belief, that they're trying to undo the nuclear family. And their support, one of their core beliefs is transgenderism and LGBT. It's hostile to the moral law of God. It wants to progress past that and bring in equity based on critical race theory. And so, man, D, when people are saying that Black Lives Matter and Christians got a problem with it, they're not saying that because they don't value black life. They're saying that because they have a problem with Black Lives Matter, the organization. You can't separate the two. I mean, you technically can if you hedge and you say, no, I don't mean this, not the organization. But it's like, that is something that people can do to kind of gain support. They make their organization name something that you can't reject. I mean, let me give you an example. If not me, let's say a white nationalist created an organization, and the organization was called White People Matter, okay? And it's a white nationalist organization. Now, would you have a problem if a pastor was getting up, is like, okay guys, there's lots of conflict in the world about race, but I want you guys to know that white people matter? I mean, you would be like, what? That's a white nationalist organization. I mean, you would see the connection. I mean, something just as simple, I bet, if I just said, yo bro, do you want to make America great? You get the insinuation. I'm not, that you can't just take the words by itself. You understand the connection to Trump's platform. And so it's like words have meaning. And in our culture, people associate these words with the platform, with the beliefs of it. And so all I'm trying to say is that disagreeing with Black Lives Matter, not wanting to support that, is not anti-Christian because the organization is anti-Christian. Now in the second verse, D1 says,
but we can't ignore this data. White cop kill a black man, no jail time, seem like black lives don't matter.
Now first I want to just say that there are a lot of injustices that have happened lately that really bother me. But I want to challenge you on something. I don't have evidence, and I don't even believe that any of those three things were based on race. Now, if you disagree with that, I want to ask you a question. What makes you think that the police officers were motivated by their hatred of black people? Because here's the thing, in order to say something that it was racially motivated, you have two things. One is they either verbalize that themselves, so if they killed somebody and they yelled out a racial slur, okay, that's evidence that it was racially motivated. But in these instances, we don't see that. We don't have it. So we have to we're judging their motives when we assume that. Instead, we just got to say that is an instance of police brutality. And part of the reason why you'd say that as opposed to racism is because you have numerous instances where people of other skin colors, including white people, receive the same type of treatment too, where they're gunned down and killed and being brutally beaten. When we assume someone's motives, you have to have evidence for that. I mean, you can't get inside someone's head and tell them, if a random woman comes up on the street and she punches me, I'm not gonna say, hey, she's a feminist. She hates the patriarchy. That's why she hit me. Maybe, but I have no evidence of that. I can't assume her motives. All I can say is that she did a wrong thing. She needs to be held accountable for what she did. I don't know her motives, but I know what she did was wrong. And that's how we need to deal with things like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Eric Garner and any other instance of police brutality. We might not know their motives, but we can't say that it's race motivated. It might, but you need evidence to do that. And the last point I want to critique is the last line of verse 2. This is what D1 says.
If you hate racism but don't do nothing, that's still a problem. Silence equals violence, bring race up and we a church divided.
Okay, now I got a big problem with that. I got a problem with the silence equals violence thing. Now there are three different categories I put people in. First, if you are racist, you are wrong, you are being sinful, you need to repent. If you are actively blocking people from standing against racism, like if you're a hindrance to that, you're like, for example, if somebody's trying to deal with personal acts of racism or even widespread racism in your community and you're actively stopping them, you are part of the problem. You need to be condemned for that, and so that is wrong. But if you are anti-racist in heart, you are not racist, but you don't use your platform to speak up against racism, you are not wrong. Let me explain why. There are so many injustices in this world, and there's not enough time, there's not enough opportunities for a person to speak out against every form of injustice in the world. God gives us the analogy of the body. in Corinthians. He says that we're not all hands, we're not all feet. Each person has different gifts. Each person has different passions. Each person plays a different role. And that's going to lead to, because we have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of gifts, a limited amount of resources, we cannot deal with everything. We need each other. There's going to be certain people who gravitate towards dealing with certain injustices, and that means by dealing with that injustice, they don't have time to deal with others, or they don't have the resources for that. Because here's the thing is, you can spread yourself so thin, and every time some injustice happens on the news, you share it, you talk about it, and you do a little bit. But you know what? That's not a huge dent. Sure, then you can say, oh, I spoke about everything. But if you really want to make a dent in an issue, you need to give it a firm focus. You need to donate, use your money, you need to use your time, you need to spend a lot of time researching it and seeing ways that you can counteract that problem. And if you do that, you don't have time to deal with a lot of other injustices. And so a lot of people now with the issue of racism are saying this type of thing. Silence equals violence. You have to speak up about it. Why aren't you mentioning Breonna Taylor? Why aren't you mentioning George Floyd? But here's the thing is I can point that back at you and be like, bro, when's the last time that you shared about the problem of abortion? Okay, maybe you did. When's the last time you shared about sex trafficking? Okay, when's the last time you shared about pedophilia? When's the last time you were talking about the problem of people in unreached nations not having the gospel and going to hell? When was the last time you talked about the problem of domestic violence? And the list can go on. You see the point. There are so many sins, there are so many injustices in this world, we can't call out them all. And so if you're going to have the ethic that silence equals violence, look at the burden that's placing on people. No one can deal with every type of injustice, and there are tons of issues that are more important than racism. That's just a fact. Murder is worse than racism. Rape is worse than racism. You know why? Because racism is a motive. This is not original to me, but somebody once said, what would you rather? Someone is racist and they go and slash your tires because they hate your race, or someone comes into your house and kills you because they wanted your TV and they were not racist. Well, I'll take that racism any day of the week because my life is more valuable. There are things that are more important than racism, but that's not to say that racism is not important. It is an evil that needs to be wiped out and fought against and preached against, and you know, just like things like, you know, the poor need to be fed, and women need to be protected, and people need to stop abusing children. There are so many problems in this world, but you can't lay on them the burden of silence equals violence. What you do need to say is you cannot be contributing to an evil. You cannot actively do that evil. You can't be racist. You can't get in the way of those who are trying to battle racism. But you can't make everyone use their platform to speak against racism. Just like I can't make you do that for the pro-life cause. Just like I can't make you do that for those who are hungry. Just like I can't make you do that for those who are going to hell. I can't. That's not fair to you. You have limited resources, you have a limited time, and your specific passion might not fit with that issue. And I understand that, and that's okay. So the silence equals violence thing is an absolute burden that you're placing on people, and it needs to stop. So those are some critical thoughts, but I just want to kind of bring this back that, you know, even though I was quite negative on those types of things, I just want to say I don't think D1 is the enemy. I think he's wrong on here, but I do appreciate him. I think he's a humble dude who's looking to have a conversation, and I think that he's just bought into a couple different lies. And so I hope that if he hears this, that he takes this to heart. I have spent some time listening to the other side. Now, I do my best to fight against being in a bubble. I read Jamar Tisby's The Color of Compromise. I read books by John Perkins on racism. I am working through right now how to be anti-racist. And so I'm listening to the other side. I'm hearing it. Sometimes there's good critiques. Jamar Tisby brings up some good points and has some things where there are real injustices in our past. Not so much how to be anti-racist. That book's trash. That one's really, really bad. But there are good points, and we do need to have this conversation. So we shouldn't shy away from conversations about race, but there are assumptions being made, and the charge of racism is getting applied too broadly, in my opinion, to people who are not actually racist, but are being made to feel like the racist because of their skin color, or because they're not speaking out with the same veracity that other people who maybe they want to make this their issue, their evil that they want to combat in this world, which is totally fine, by the way, and I support. Okay, so those are some thoughts. Feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think.